The wind came from the north, like a pack of wolves tearing across the open prairie with teeth made of ice and fury. Snow whipped horizontal, erasing the horizon, swallowing distance and memory. The world shrank to the length of a man's arm. Temperature plunged so fast that breath crystallized midair, and nostrils stung with each inhalation. Lakota leaned low over his horse's neck, feeling the mare's muscles coil and release beneath him. The animal fought for purchase on ground that had transformed from prairie grass to a sheet of treacherous glass. He wore no ceremonial regalia, no beaded vest, no war bonnet heavy with honor. Only winter buckskins darkened by weather and work, and a single eagle feather bound into his hair with rawhide. The feather marked a vow he had made to no one but himself, a promise whose weight he carried in silence. To his left, the herd surged and contracted like a single organism gripped by terror. Frost rimed their hides. Steam poured from flared nostrils. Eyes rolled white, showing the animal panic that preceded stampede. Less than 100 yards ahead lay a shallow ravine crusted with ice, its bottom littered with stones that would shatter bone without mercy. Lakota had seen what stampedes left behind. He had pulled men from wreckage, their bodies broken in ways that made dying slow. A figure moved through the storm on his right flank, with a steadiness that belonged to people who had already lost everything worth losing. Madeleine rode with her shoulders square, guiding her horse through pressure and weight rather than force. She wore a man's wool coat over layers of practical cotton, a wide-brimmed hat lashed down with scarf gloves too thin for this weather. Wind-burned skin stretched pale over sharp cheekbones, but her eyes never left the herd's leading edge. She whistled a note that pierced wind and chaos. Her horse responded as though they shared one mind, angling toward the lead steer. The massive brindled bull had ice clinging to his horns like frozen blood. Madeleine shook out her rope with economy of motion, no wasted gesture, and sent the loop sailing. It settled over one horn with precision, born of repetition, gentle pressure timed to the animal's stride. The bull hesitated. The herd hesitated. The line held. Lakota watched, caught in a moment of recalculation. People did not stay composed in the face of death unless they had intimate acquaintance with it. He shouted over the wind, "Stay close. If they break, they will kill you." Madeleine did not look at him. Her focus remained absolute. "Then don't let them break." The storm howled. The herd trembled on chaos's edge. And Lakota felt the stirring of a question he could not afford to ask. What does this woman know about dying? 3 days earlier, Mud Creek had squatted on the frontier like every other settlement clinging to existence, through sheer stubborn refusal to admit defeat. Raw timber buildings sagged under the weight of too many winters. A single street churned to frozen ruts by wagon wheels. The river bend provided the only reliable water for 50 miles, which made it worth fighting for, which made it worth killing for. Madeleine descended from the stagecoach, carrying a trunk, a leather satchel stuffed with lesson papers, and an envelope she kept against her ribs beneath her coat. 26 years old. Widow for 8 months. Schoolteacher by training, investigator by necessity. She had come west because Pennsylvania held nothing but a grave she could not afford to visit, and questions that would not let her sleep. The driver dumped her trunk in frozen mud. "Good luck, ma'am." It sounded like condolence. She surveyed the town with the systematic attention she had learned from her husband. Largest building saloon. Second largest warehouse emblazoned with Crow Cattle Company in letters visible from a mile off. Smallest a schoolhouse with boarded windows and a door that hung askew. A man approached, spine bent by labor face like wind-scoured leather. His coat bore patches at the elbows, his hat a brim gnawed by horses. "You Madeleine Whitmore?" "I am." "Amos Harker. I sent the letter. I received it. Still willing? I wouldn't be here otherwise." Amos studied her with the care of a man who had been wrong about people before and paid for it. Finally, he spoke. My kids need teaching. I need someone who can keep books without getting robbed. Can you do numbers? I can. Then you'll do. Amos's ranch crouched 5 miles outside town buildings, huddled together as though seeking warmth from one another. He ran perhaps 150 head on land that was legally open range, but increasingly controlled by men who considered legality a suggestion. His wife had died 2 winters back. His 3 children, 8, 10, 12, watched the world with wariness that came from witnessing their father lose battles daily. Madeline taught them mornings, worked the ranch books, afternoons. The numbers told a story she had learned to read: irregular fees, vanishing tallies, payments labeled with impressive terms that meant nothing. Amos was hemorrhaging money to a system built to resemble law. Fitzgerald Crowe owned the largest ranch in the territory, controlled freight contracts, kept the town in his pocket through strategic application of money and violence. His enforcement mechanism was Sheriff Broken Nose Bob Harland, whose face suggested intimate acquaintance with mule kicks and whose understanding of justice was entirely transactional. Her first warning came from Dr. Carolina Weiss, the town's only physician, German immigrant, overworked, underpaid, treating an epidemic of children with stomach cramps and fever. She cornered Madeline outside the general store, voice low and urgent. The river water tastes wrong. It is not winter sickness. Something is in the water. Madeline frowned. What makes you certain? Patterns. I keep records. Symptoms cluster downstream where the current slows. Dr. Weiss's eyes were flint hard. You understand numbers. Perhaps you see what I cannot prove. Madeleine began watching. Ranchers paid water fees to men who owned nothing. Crow's cattle drank upstream where water ran clear. Smaller ranchers watered herds downstream where sediment collected. Fees increased monthly. Refusal brought consequences. A system built on manufactured scarcity and cultivated fear. Crow was tightening a noose, one invoice at a time. Lakota appeared on a cold afternoon, leading a pack horse loaded with winter furs, riding a mare that moved with careful intelligence. He traded at the general store for salt coffee cartridges. Men stared at him with the particular hostility reserved for reminders that this land had belonged to others first. He ignored them until a boy threw a rock. The stone hissed past his shoulder, clattered against siding. Lakota turned slowly, caught the second rock from the air, held it briefly, dropped it at the boy's feet. The boy ran. Madeleine watched from across the street. She registered the restraint, recognized the exhaustion beneath it. Lakota was perhaps 24 or 25, but carried himself like someone who had already fought more battles than he could afford to remember. Their eyes met. His acknowledgement came as the slightest inclination of his head recognition without invitation. Then he mounted and rode. She did not know his name yet, but she remembered how he moved like someone who expected trouble and refused to waste energy worrying about its arrival. 2 days later, the storm rolled in like an invading army. Sky turned the color of old iron. Wind rose, carrying the smell of snow and violence. By midday, temperature had dropped 15 degrees. By evening, the world was white. Amos stood in the barn doorway, watching his livelihood drift toward disaster. Herds moving toward Crow's fence line. They cross it, his riders claim them as strays. We lose everything. How many hands? Madeleine asked. 2, 3 if old Thomas's back holds. Not enough. I know. Madeleine reached for her coat. Then I ride. Amos looked at her like she had suggested walking into fire. You understand what you're proposing? If that herd crosses the line, you lose the ranch. I can ride. I can rope. I follow orders. She met his eyes. That's 3 things you need and don't have. Amos hesitated, then conceded with visible reluctance. Don't die. Dakota arrived at the ranch gate as wind began its assault. He sat his horse reading the sky and the cattle's nervous clustering with equal attention. Amos walked out to meet him. "Storm's moving fast," Dakota said. His English was precise, unaccented. "That herd will break. I know. Your men will scatter. The cattle will run. I know." Dakota studied the distant herd and then returned his attention to Amos. "You need someone who understands how to hold a line when the world goes white. You offering for wages? How much? $3. Blanket. Food." "Done." Dakota dismounted, led his horse into the barn. Madeline was cinching her saddle when he entered. They regarded each other, two strangers about to ride into conditions that killed people. "You know what you're doing?" he asked. "I know how to stay on a horse." "Different from knowing how to keep a herd from killing you?" "I understand the distinction." Dakota watched her with the same careful attention he had given the sky. "Ride like it matters, not like you're brave." Madeline tightened the girth. "I ride because stopping isn't an option." Dakota's chin dropped, fractionally approval given grudgingly. The storm hit an hour later. They saved the herd. Barely. 3 hours of wind that shrieked like something dying, snow that erased sight, cold that turned flesh numb despite leather and wool. The cattle bunched and surged, animal terror overriding thought. Dakota rode the left flank, using his horse's body and positioning to bend the herd's trajectory away from the ravine. Madeleine matched him on the right, maintaining steady pressure. When the lead steer broke toward the fence line, Madeleine moved, without hesitation. Her rope flew loop, settling over horn with precision that spoke of hours practicing motions until they became reflex. The steer slowed. The herd slowed. The line held. By the time the storm passed, the cattle stood exhausted, frost-covered, alive. Amos's hired hands stared at Madeleine like she had conjured miracles. Dakota simply watched her, with an expression that suggested he was revising previous assessments. They rode back through silence, broken only by breath steaming and leather creaking. When they dismounted, Madeleine's legs buckled. Dakota caught her elbow, steadied her without comment, released. She glanced at him, offered the briefest acknowledgement. Inside the barn, Amos paid Dakota in coin and blanket. "You saved my herd." She did. Dakota tilted his head toward Madeleine. Amos looked between them, frowning. "You worked together before?" "No." "Well, you do now." The next morning, Crow's riders arrived. 4 men led by Greasy Pete, whose nickname derived from his habit of slicking hair with bear fat. He wore a long coat, twin revolvers, and a smile suggesting he enjoyed the work. Behind him rode Sheriff Harland, whose presence transformed intimidation into legal authority. They waited in the yard for Amos to emerge. "Morning," Pete said. "Heard about your storm trouble." "We managed." "That's fine, real fine." Pete's smile widened. "But we got ourselves a situation. Your cattle drifted near Crow's fence line. That's trespass." "No fence on open range." "Is now." Pete gestured toward the river bend, where new posts jutted from frozen ground. "Mr. Crow's filed claim on that land. Legal and proper. You grazed cattle there, that's trespass. Penalties owed." "How much?" 20 head, $200 cash. Amos's face drained. "That's theft." Harlan shifted in his saddle hand, drifting toward his revolver. "That's law. Pay or we collect cattle as settlement." Dakota stood near the corral rail, utterly still. He did not move, did not speak. His presence simply expanded until it filled space in a way that made men reconsider their intentions. Pete noticed. Frowned. "You got words, Indian." "No." "Then keep it that way." Dakota said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on Pete's hands. Madeleine emerged from the house carrying a ledger. "I'd like documentation of that claim." Pete stared at her. "What?" "The land claim. You said it was legal and properly filed. I'd like to see survey documents, filing records, payment receipts. If Mr. Crow owns that land, paperwork exists." Pete's smile evaporated. "Lady, you're talking about things you don't understand." "I understand how land claims work. I understand survey requirements. I understand that open range cannot be claimed without documented legal process." She held up the ledger. "I also understand accounting. These books show Mr. Harker has paid fees for grazing rights, water access, and every invented charge you've presented. You want more, prove it in court." Harland leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You're new here. Don't understand how things work." "I understand theft perfectly well." Harland's hand moved closer to his weapon. "Be careful, lady." Amos stepped between them, voice tight. "We'll pay. 20 head." "No," Madeleine said. "Yes." Amos's tone allowed no argument. "Take them and leave." Pete smiled again. Smart man. They took the cattle. Amos stood watching his herd driven away, shoulders bowed under invisible weight. That night, someone tried to burn his haystack. Dakota caught the flicker early orange glow that did not belong. He moved fast, smothering flames with canvas and snow before they could spread. Madeleine hauled water until her arms trembled and lungs burned from smoke. When it ended, they stood in darkness, breathing hard, reeking of smoke and wet wool. Soot streaked Madeleine's face. Scorch marks blackened Dakota's coat. They did not speak. They simply looked at each other, silent acknowledgement passing between them. "You stayed." I noticed. The next day, Madeleine began her real work, going through Amos's books, line by line, with steady, practiced precision. She found the pattern beneath the chaos: irregular fees, missing tallies, invoices that did not match deliveries. Not just extortion. A system built to resemble legitimacy. She intended to dismantle it. 3 days passed. Madeleine worked by lamplight, ledgers and invoices spread across the kitchen table like evidence at a trial. Her fingers traced columns, circled discrepancies, noted dates. Dakota sat near the stove, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. He asked no questions, simply watched with the patience of someone who understood that silence could be its own form of support. After an hour, Madeleine sat back, rubbing eyes that burned from strain and smoke-damaged air. Crows bleeding him dry, monthly fees with no legal foundation, just theft wearing legal costume. "Can you prove it?" "I can demonstrate pattern. Whether anyone cares is different." Dakota set down his cleaning cloth. "Why are you here?" Madeleine looked at him. "What? You're not a rancher, not a settler." His eyes held steady. "You came for a reason. What is it?" Silence stretched. Then Madeleine reached inside her coat, withdrew the envelope she guarded, constantly set it on the table between them. "My husband died 8 months ago, near Fire Mountain Mine. They called it accident." Dakota waited. He was an engineer, understood mining contracts, safety protocols, survey mathematics. He was careful. Her voice remained level through visible effort. "Before he died, he sent me this." She spread the envelope's contents, copied ledger pages, a survey map marked in red ink, a note in careful handwriting. If you're reading this, something happened. Keep these safe. Take them to someone who matters. Don't trust local law, they're bought. I love you." J. Dakota leaned forward, studying the pages. Ledger entries were technical tonnage estimates, payroll records, chemical inventories. One section stood out: repeated mercury purchases, listed under amalgamation supplies, with no corresponding output records. "Mercury separation," he said. Yes. Extracts gold from ore. Effective. The waste kills everything downstream. Lakota examined the map. The mine was clearly marked a thin blue line tracing watercourse that fed the river bend near Mud Creek. Margin notation FC demands silence. Will not comply. Local law compromised evidence in back pages. You believe Crow is poisoning the water. I believe my husband found proof and Crow had him murdered for it. Lakota studied her face, reading grief held under iron control rage that burned cold rather than hot. Those papers make you a target. They already killed for them once. Her jaw set. I'm finished being silent. Over the next 2 days, Madeleine's accounting skill became surgical. She cross-referenced mine ledger against Amos's invoices and Crow's public payroll, found names paid weekly amounts matching ammunition purchases, travel allowances, escort fees. But checking camp rosters, supply records, work schedules revealed those names existed nowhere except payment logs. Names on the pay list that only live in ink, she said, tapping the page. Crow's paying men who never sleep in camp or paying drifters who never swung a pick. Lakota studied the notations. Hired guns. At least a dozen, maybe more. His jaw tightened fractionally. Small army. Then Madeleine found the third layer. Tucked in back pages, separate list labeled Legal Assurances. Monthly payments of $50 to Judge M. Dates matched periods when land disputes vanished and theft charges evaporated. Bribe payments, she said, voice gone quiet with fury. To a judge. My husband tried to warn me local law is bought. Then we cannot bring this to Mud Creek. No. Stone Bridge has circuit judge. Someone outside Crow's reach. Lakota's expression darkened. 2 days ride through territory Crow controls. Then we ride carefully. But Madeleine did more than plan carefully. She did something her husband had taught her when dealing with dangerous men. She created a safeguard for the worst day. Working late one night after everyone slept, she copied key pages from the original ledger by lamplight, the Mercury purchases, the false pay lists, the bribe records. Then she did something clever. She made a second set of copies with subtle alterations. Changed a few dates, modified some amounts. Made the alterations obvious enough that anyone examining closely would spot the differences. These flawed copies she placed in a separate envelope, sealed it, and hid it in the false bottom of her trunk, where anyone searching would find it. The real copies, perfect exact, she sewed into the lining of her coat with thread that matched the fabric. Work her mother had taught her needlework so fine it was invisible unless you knew where to look. Lakota found her finishing the work just before dawn. Watched her bite off thread smooth the fabric, said nothing, but his eyes tracked her hands with understanding. You expect someone to search, he said, not a question. Men like Crow always search. I want them to find something. Decoy. Yes. And if they believe the copies are real, they'll think they've won. Stop looking. She met his eyes. By the time they realize the truth, we'll be in Stone Bridge. Subplots tightened around them like nooses. Dr. Weiss collected water samples in glass jars, labeled by date and location. Kept symptom logs for every sick child, correlating illness with water source. Not legal proof, but documentation that could become evidence. She brought findings to Madeleine one evening, face grim. 3 more children this week. All downstream families. This is systematic. Lucian, the telegraph operator, lived above the saloon. Drank too much, slept too little. Madeleine found him outside his office one night, smoking with hands that shook. Asked directly, "How much does Crow pay you to lose messages?" Lucian flinched. "Don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Something broke in him. Eyes red-rimmed, voice hoarse. $5 per message. 10 for anything going to territorial authorities. He wants to know who's talking, wants to stop it before it starts. Will you testify? Lady, I'll be dead before I finish speaking. Not if Crow's arrested first. Lucian laughed, bitter sound. You think that'll happen? I intend to make it happen. Ayita, a young Lakota woman from Dakota's camp, faced pressure from Crow's men to reveal winter cache locations. Caught between fear and loyalty, afraid of what riders would do if she refused, afraid of what her people would say if she complied. Dakota found her by the river one afternoon, staring at water like it held answers. They want betrayal, he said quietly. I know. Will you give it? She looked at him, tears welling. I don't want to, but they said they'd burn the camp if I refuse. Dakota crouched beside her. Then we move the caches tonight, before they can be found. And if they come after me, you stay with us. Don't go back alone. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. Nothing to apologize for. 2 incidents escalated danger ambush at the cut bank 4 days after the storm. Madeline and Dakota rode to the mine scouting for additional evidence. Followed narrow trail along the river where bank dropped steeply to icy water. World was quiet, muffled by snow. Then a rifle cracked. Bark exploded beside Dakota's face, spraying splinters that drew blood. His horse reared. He controlled it through knee pressure scanning tree line. Second shot closer. Madeline's heart slammed against ribs, hard enough to bruise. Down the bank. Dakota said, voice calm, despite circumstances. They spurred horses down steep slope, sliding on loose snow and frozen mud. Too steep for pursuit on horseback, anyone following would need to dismount, giving them seconds. They hit bottom hard, horses scrambling rode low, using bank as cover. Behind them, men shouted. Shots echoed, but angle was wrong. They rode until shouts faded, then stopped to breathe. Madeline's hands shook. She reloaded cartridges with numb fingers, counting by habit, slid them into Dakota's palm. Their fingers brushed brief contact, cold leather, functional necessity. But something passed between them in that moment, unspoken recognition of shared mortality. Hurt? He asked. No. Good. Stay near. She met his eyes. Where else would I go? Warning in the barn 2 nights later. Amos was beaten on his own property. Madeline heard commotion, ran outside. Arrived to find attackers gone, Amos in the straw, bleeding from face and mouth ribs, clearly broken, breathing shallow. Dr. Weiss came immediately, examined him with brisk efficiency. Cracked ribs, possible concussion. He needs rest. Amos gripped Madeline's wrist, voice rough with pain. They want the papers. I know. Don't give them. I won't. He closed his eyes. Then we're dead already. Madeleine looked at Dr. Weiss, then at Dakota, standing in the doorway, like a sentinel. We move fast. If we wait, they pick us off one by one. Dakota's chin dropped fractionally. Then we go to the mine tonight. The mine entrance gaped in the mountainside like a wound that refused to heal. Snow drifted against rotting timbers and rusted rails. Air seeping out smelled wrong, metallic chemical tainted with substances that did not belong underground. Dakota studied the entrance. If timbers collapse, we die inside. Then we don't let them collapse. They entered with oil lanterns held high, walking planks laid over pools of black water. Mine had been abandoned months, but evidence of recent activity scattered everywhere, fresh boot prints in mud cigar stubs and a crushed chew tobacco tin, a broken lantern near a support beam. Someone had been here recently. Foreman's office sat deep inside small room carved from rock, furnished with desk chair strongbox bolted to floor. Madeleine knelt beside the strongbox, withdrew a plain metal ring from her pocket, tiny key soldered inside. Her husband had worn it daily, not as jewelry, but as tool. She fitted key to lock. It turned. Inside, original ledgers. Not copies, but real records, leather-bound, ink-filled. Madeline flipped pages, breath quickening. Every transaction documented mercury purchases, waste disposal routes, false pay lists. Undeniable proof. Then she found something else. Folded letter, tucked between final pages, written in careful hand, she recognized instantly. Madeleine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I kept this separate because strong boxes can be opened. Crow knows I found evidence. Sent word through Pete, told me to forget what I'd seen or I'd have an accident like the others. I refused. I've documented everything. Mercury dumping, payoffs, hired guns. But there's worse. Found correspondence between Crow and Territorial Surveyor Aldrich. They're planning to force Lakota off winter grounds through fraudulent mineral rights survey. Crow's paying Aldrich to falsify reports. Also found proof he's bribing Judge Michaels in Mud Creek $50 monthly to dismiss cases and delay investigations. Invoices are in back ledger under legal assurances. That's why I'm warning you, don't trust local law. Take this to Denver or find circuit judge from outside. I confronted Crow 3 days ago. He didn't deny anything. Said, "You're a smart man, Whitmore. Smart men know when to keep mouths shut." I told him I wouldn't. He smiled, said, "Then you're not as smart as I thought. I'm mailing you copies tomorrow. If something happens, take them to territorial authorities. Don't trust local law. Harland works for Crow. So does Michaels. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't come home." James Madeleine's vision blurred. She pressed letter to her chest, grief and rage twisting like blade between ribs. Dakota leaned close, reading over her shoulder in silence. When finished, he placed his hand briefly on her shoulder. No false comfort, only presence acknowledging pain. "He knew," she whispered. "Knew they'd kill him. Sent evidence anyway. He wanted you to finish it." "I will." Then footsteps echoed from tunnel entrance. Dakota's hand shot out, gripped her arm, pointed toward lantern light flickering against walls. Boots scraped stone. Greasy Pete's voice carried through darkness. "Check the office. They're here, that's where they'll be." Dakota pulled Madeleine into narrow fissure in rock, barely wide enough for one person, impossibly tight for two. He pressed her back against freezing stone, moved in front, shielding her body with his. Space so constricted, their bodies pressed together, chest to chest, breath mingling. Mine dust filled her throat. Cough built. Dakota clamped gloved hand over her mouth, eyes locking onto hers with fierce intensity. She gripped his wrist nails, digging through leather, forcing herself silent. Cough swelled in her chest like scream, but she swallowed it, breathing through nose, every muscle rigid. Pete's boots scraped past fissure entrance so close, dust fell in their hair. His lantern swept walls, lingered on their shadow. Madeleine's heart hammered so violently, she felt certain Pete could hear it. Dakota's jaw pressed near her temple, breath warm against her skin. He whispered single word, barely sound, "Still." Pete moved on, muttering. Footsteps receded. Dakota kept hand over her mouth 10 seconds longer, listening. When he finally removed it, Madeleine gasped, pulling air that tasted like metal and terror. Neither moved immediately. They stayed pressed together in darkness, hearts pounding, bodies trembling with adrenaline. Madeleine realized she still gripped Dakota's wrist. Released it slowly. Their eyes met in dim light. "Thank you," she breathed. He shook his head fractionally. "Not out yet." They froze another minute. Then, "Move." They slipped from fissure, ran low using shadows. Reached mine entrance, burst into open air with burning lungs and shaking legs. Behind them, shouts. Gunshot cracked, ricocheted off stone. They ran to horses mounted, rode hard into darkness. Miles later they stopped, sat breathing hard, staring at stars. Madeline withdrew ledger, and letter held them up. Leather-scarred pages wrinkled but intact. "We have everything," she said, voice breaking slightly. "Proof Crow ordered my husband's death. Proof he's bribing local judge." Dakota looked at letter, then at her face. "Now we keep it safe." Studying the ledger by firelight revealed the full scope: Mercury dumping false pay lists, surveyor conspiracy, documented bribes to Judge M. $50 monthly for 18 months. $900 to ensure justice never touched Crow. Dakota read entries in silence. Finally closed ledger, looked at Madeleine. "This is about more than cattle." "Yes. Using this starts a war. War already started. We're just naming it." Dakota studied her face, reading determination forged in grief, rage transmuted to purpose. "Then we finish it." Crow retaliated with surgical precision. Next morning, Sheriff Harland arrested Amos on fabricated rustling and sedition charges. Dragged him from his ranch while his children screamed and begged. Madeline tried intervening. Harland shoved her aside hard enough to knock her into frozen mud. "Stay out of this," he growled, "or you're next." Same day, Dr. Weiss's clinic was destroyed. Medicine bottles smashed, bandages torn, records scattered. She arrived to find door hanging open, life's work ruined. Stood in wreckage with tears streaming, whispering, "They want us to stop." Lucian's telegraph key was seized, line cut. Communication with outside world went silent. Mud Creek was sealed by fear, isolated, vulnerable. Then Crow struck Dakota's people. Riders burned winter cash, hidden in Hill's blankets, dried meat, stored grain reduced to ash. In chaos, Ayita was taken. Runner arrived at Amos's ranch, breathless, terrified. They took her, said if we don't surrender what they want, they'll kill her. Dakota's face went utterly still. His eyes turned cold in a way that preceded violence. "Where?" "Crow's ranch, holding her there." Madeline stepped forward, voice tight. "We take evidence to Stone Bridge. Circuit judge arrives in 2 weeks. If we can reach him." 2 weeks is too long. "Then we leave now. They'll kill you before you reach town line. Then we fight." Dakota looked at her, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly." Her voice shook with contained fury. "I understand danger. I understand death. But if we do nothing, we lose everything. Amos loses his ranch. Your people lose their land. More children sicken. More people vanish. And Crow wins." She stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "I didn't come here to watch evil win. Neither did you." Dakota held her gaze. Finally, his chin dipped fractionally. "Then we do this properly." The plan was practical, rooted in era's limitations. They would travel by horse to Stone Bridge, carrying evidence to circuit judge. With telegraph cut, no way to send word ahead. They would carry ledger, James's letter, Dr. Weiss's logs, sworn statements from witnesses, willing to risk everything. Madeline nearly broke into reckless action, trying to saddle alone, with ledger convinced speed alone could force accountability. Dakota stopped her, seizing her horse's reins, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Want to die fast, go alone. I want it to stop. Then we do it right." Her hands shook on reins. "I don't know if I can wait." "You can." Voice firm but not unkind. "Because if you die, this dies with you. They win." She stared at him, breathing hard. Something shifted in her expression, reluctant acceptance. She released reins. "All right, your way." They prepared in silence. Dr. Weiss insisted on coming despite danger. "I have evidence. Records. If I stay, they destroy them and me. Lucian agreed to testify, hands shaking, as he signed statement. Dead either way. Might as well make it count. Amos's eldest son, Thomas, 12 years old, volunteered as scout. I know the trails. Can see trouble coming. Dakota looked at the boy, then handed him a knife. Stay hidden. See riders, you run. Understood. Yes, sir. They left at dawn 2 days later, riding hard toward Stone Bridge. The final confrontation came at the river crossing near Stone Bridge, where winter's violence and human malice collided with catastrophic force. Young Thomas galloped back, face pale. Something's wrong at the ford. River's too loud. Ice looks wrong. Dakota rode ahead to scout. What he saw confirmed his worst suspicions. River roared louder than it should beneath winter ice. Surface bulged in places, cracking and groaning under pressure. Downriver waterline ran too high for season ice chunks, piled against banks and jagged formations. Local men watched with wary eyes. One spoke, "Ice jam upstream. Been building pressure for days. It's gonna give. Question is when." Dakota returned. "Crossing's unstable. If we try now, we risk the ice breaking." "Can we go around?" Madeline asked. 2 days added to the trip. "We don't have 2 days." Then Crow's riders appeared. They drove a stolen herd toward the riverbank, Greasy Pete at their head smiling. Behind them, a rifleman took position on high ground, rifle braced. Dakota's jaw set. They're going to stampede the herd, use chaos to destroy evidence. "Or kill us," Dr. Weiss said quietly. "Both." The assault came in 3 devastating phases, pinned. The sniper fired. Shot split air beside Madeline's ear, high whistling shriek that left ears ringing, skull throbbing. Acrid gunpowder smell hit her nostrils, sharp and nauseating. Snow exploded at her horse's hooves. Animal reared, nearly throwing her. She clung to saddle horn knuckles, white heart slamming ribs. Second shot so close to Dakota that muzzle flash lit his face. Bullet tore through coat sleeve, missed flesh by hair's breadth. Fabric smoked. Burned wool mixed with gunpowder. "Cover!" he shouted. They scrambled behind half-buried wagon bodies, crashing into frozen wood. Madeline's knee struck wagon bed pane, shot through leg like fire. She tasted blood where she'd bitten tongue. Dr. Weiss landed beside her, clutching medical bag. Shots came steady, crack, 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 each closer. Sniper pinning them like insects. Splinters exploded. Bullet punched through wood inches from Madeline's head debris, spraying her cheek like tiny needles. "High ground advantage," Dakota said, voice tight. "Can't stay here." "Can't move," Dr. Weiss said. "He'll shoot us the moment we step out." Dakota counted shooter's rhythm. 5 seconds between shots. Time to move if you were fast lucky. He looked at Madeleine. "When I move, you run for those trees. Don't stop." "What about you?" "I cover you. That's suicide. It's survival." His eyes were stone. "You're carrying evidence. You're the target. If you die, this ends, so you run." Madeline gripped ledger, felt her husband's letter inside, felt cold seeping through gloves into bones. Thought of James's careful handwriting, thought of sick children, thought of Ayita held captive. Her chin dropped. "All right." Stampede. Crow's riders pushed lead steers toward unstable bank. Herd began to surge, massive wall of muscle horn panic. Ground trembled under hundreds of hooves. Ice cracked with sounds like gunshots. Bellowing filled air, primal sound of pure terror. Dakota vaulted onto his horse, rode straight toward the herd's flank. Insane. Only option. Lead steer was massive longhorn, wild eyes, foam on muzzle. Charged forward, head-low horns flashing. Dakota angled his horse to intercept, using body as moving wall. Steer hesitated. Lakota whistled sharp, pressed harder. Line began bending. But pressure was too much. Cattle behind pushed forward, driven by fear and riders' shouts. Herd threatened to break anyway. Madeline heard sickening snap of cow's leg breaking on ice, sound like branch cracking, followed by bellow of agony cutting through chaos. Madeline saw it happening. Did not think. Acted. But not with salt that was foolish fantasy. Instead, she did something desperate and physical. She fired her revolver twice into the air, directly in front of the lead animals, while simultaneously positioning her horse to block their forward path. The combination of gunshot noise from unexpected direction and solid obstacle directly ahead made the lead animals veer instinctively away from the bank. Behind her, Lakota matched the maneuver from the opposite flank, creating a funnel that bent the herd's momentum away from the unstable ice. But riders kept pushing. Pete rode along, backfiring pistol, driving cattle forward with noise and violence. Then ice gave. Flood break. Sound like the world splitting. Deep, grinding crack echoed across river, followed by roar, drowning everything. Ice jam upstream shattered under days of built pressure. Water surged forward in massive wave, dark and churning, carrying ice chunks size of wagons. Smell hit them, cold, mineral metallic scent of deep earth and violence. River exploded over banks. Water poured across low ground, flooding crossing in seconds. Current was brutal, fast, unstoppable. Cattle at herd's edge went down, legs snapping with sounds like breaking timber. Bellows swallowed by water's roar. Madeline watched young cow disappear beneath churning surface, eyes wide and white. Her horse reared, screaming. She clung to saddle legs locked around barrel hands, gripping leather until knuckles went white and fingers cramped. Icy water surged around horse's legs, so cold it burned, searing pain, stealing breath, seizing muscles. Water soaked through boots, skirt, coat, stealing warmth with terrifying speed. Legs went numb. Teeth chattered hard enough to taste blood. High ground! Lakota shouted, voice nearly lost. Dr. Weiss's horse stumbled. Doctor fell, landing hard in churning water with splash, sending icy spray. Surfaced, gasping, clutching bag. Current dragged her sideways toward grinding ice chunks. She fought, kicking, trying to reach ground, but water was too strong. Face went under. Surfaced, coughing, choking. Lakota rode straight into flood. Water hit his horse's chest. Animal fought for footing on slick, invisible bottom. He leaned down, grabbed Dr. Weiss's arm, hauled her up behind him with desperate strength. She clung to him, coughing, shaking lips, already turning blue. In chaos, Pete appeared on foot, dragging Ayita toward flood line. Held pistol to her head, eyes wild with fury and fear. Water surged around his knees. Ice chunks tumbled past. Smell of wet leather and terror filled air. Back off or she dies, Pete shouted, voice cracking. Lakota rode toward him, slow and deliberate. Face calm, hand on revolver. Let her go. Not a chance. You're standing in a flood. You'll die here. Then so does she. Pete pressed gun harder against Ayita's temple. She whimpered, tears streaming, body shaking. Madeline saw Pete's finger tighten on trigger. Saw panic in Ayita's eyes. Saw flood rising. She did not try heroics. Did something practical. Pete's horse was tied to broken fence 10 feet away, stamping pulling rope, eyes rolling white. Madeline rode toward it, withdrew Lakota's knife-severed rope with single slash. Horse bolted, crashed into Pete from behind with full weight. Pete stumbled, grip on Ayita loosening. Gun swung away from her head. Ayita ripped free, ran, splashing through water toward Lakota, braids, flying breath, ragged sobs. Pete raised pistol, aimed at her back. Fired. Shot went wide in chaos. Aimed again. Sniper adjusted, targeting Madeline. She saw muzzle flash, heard shot crack. Lakota threw his body into her path. Impact was brutal. Bullet hit high in shoulder, spinning him, knocking him from saddle with mule kick force. He hit ground hard, splashed into waist-deep icy water. Breath ripped out. Pain exploded, white-hot, blinding, all-consuming. Vision flashed white, red, gray. Tasted blood flooding mouth, copper and salt. Cold water shocked his system, stealing remaining air from lungs. Madeline screamed. Sound tore from her throat, raw and primal. She dropped from horse, landed in waist-deep water, stealing her breath, dragged him by coat collar toward broken fence rail. Hands shook violently. Water made him impossibly heavy. Felt current pulling them both toward grinding ice. She pressed fabric against wound. Blood welled between fingers, hot against frozen skin, staining water red. Smell of blood mixed with gunpowder and river iron and salt and cold. "Don't you die," she said, voice breaking into sobs. "Don't you dare die on me." Dakota's eyes fluttered, tried to speak. Only rasp came out, followed by wet cough spraying blood across lips. Townsfolk and Stonebridge deputy finally moved flanking sniper. Shooter fired twice more, turned to run. Dr. Weiss, soaked and bleeding from gash, where ice struck her side, stumbled toward them. "Let me see him." In those seconds, while Dr. Weiss distracted Pete calling for help, Dakota, half-stunned, vision swimming pain, screaming through every nerve-raised revolver, with shaking hand, fired one clean shot. Recoil sent fresh agony through wounded shoulder. Sniper dropped, tumbling from position. Not glory. Necessity. Survival. Flood subsided slowly, leaving wreckage. Scattered cattle, some dead with twisted legs, some limping and bellowing. Crow's riders fled, horses splashing through receding water. Stonebridge pulled survivors from slush and wreckage. Ayita was wrapped in blankets, shaking, alive, eyes hollow. Could not stop crying, deep, wrenching sobs of terror finally released. Local woman held her, rocking gently, whispering reassurances. Amos was freed when Stonebridge deputy reversed Harlan's illegal charges. He arrived at river crossing as water receded, pulled children into fierce embrace. Thomas clung to him, face pressed against father's chest, shoulders shaking. Dr. Weiss lay on makeshift stretcher, bleeding from deep gash. Breath came shallow. Blood-soaked bandages faster than replacement. Face, gray lips, pale. She gripped Madeline's hand with surprising strength. "Don't let them bury this." Madeline knelt beside her, tears streaming, mixing with river water and blood. "I won't. Promise. I promise." Dr. Weiss's grip loosened. Good. Then it was worth it. Dakota was carried to Stonebridge building, where a local doctor worked through night, removing bullet stitching wound. Surgery was brutal, no proper anesthetic, only whiskey and leather strap to bite. Dakota endured in silence, face gray sweat soaking hair. Hands clenched table edges until wood creaked. Madeline stayed beside him entire time, holding his free hand. When pain peaked, speaking quietly about storm snow and moonlight, her husband's handwriting, justice coming. When finished, Dakota lay pale and exhausted on narrow cot. She brushed damp hair from forehead with gentle fingers. "You saved my life." He opened eyes, focusing with effort. "You saved mine first. When storm, you didn't run. You stayed." She squeezed his hand. "Where else would I go?" Over the next 3 days, Madeline tended his wound with careful attention. Changed bandages, cleaned stitches, brought water when he burned with fever. Stayed when nightmares made him wake gasping. One night, when fever broke and he woke clear-headed, he found her asleep in chair beside his cot, hands still resting near his. He watched her sleep, face exhausted, determined even in rest, and felt something shift inside him that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with choice. 3 days later, Dakota tried leaving. On his feet, barely arm in sling, moving toward door with deliberate gait of someone held together by will. Madeline stopped him in hallway. "Where are you going?" "Back to my people." "You can't ride like that." "I'll manage." "Dakota." Her voice broke. "Please." He stopped back to her. Long moment passed, then turned eyes raw walls stripped away. "I can't carry this alone," she said quietly. "I need you." Dakota watched her. Something softened in his expression recognition. "Then we carry it together." Evidence forced doorway open. Madeleine presented original ledger James's letter detailing Crow's threat and conspiracy's bribe payments to Judge Michael's survey map. Dr. Weiss's logs to Circuit Judge Samuel Harrington at Stone Bridge. Judge was stern 60-something gray-haired, unimpressed by theatrics. Read documents in silence. When he reached James's letter, jaw tightened. Seeing bribe records, eyes went cold with fury. "This is murder confession," he said quietly, tapping letter. "And this," gestured to bribe records, "is corruption at highest level." "Yes, sir." "You can verify handwriting. My husband's hand. I have other letters for comparison." Judge set letter down carefully, as though sacred. "I see." Looked at her with respect. "You've come far for justice, Mrs. Whitmore. Too far to stop now." He called for depositions. Lucian testified about paid message blocking. Voice shook but did not recant. Produced notebook recording, every payment intercepted, telegram lie told on Crow's orders. $5 for small messages. 10 for anything going to territorial authorities. I kept track because I thought someday I'd find courage to use it. Stonebridge deputy testified about Harlan's abuse, presenting list of illegal arrests and extortion stretching back 3 years. Wanted to do something long time, but Harlan had backing. Now I know where that backing came from. Amos testified about systematic cattle theft and property destruction. Children sat in courtroom wide-eyed, watching father speak truth to power, first time. Paid every fee they demanded, every invented charge. They still took from me, still beat me, because there was no law to stop them. Aida testified about threats against her people and destroyed winter stores. Spoke in clear, steady voice, refusing intimidation. They said they'd burn our camp, take our children, said no one would believe us if we told. Lifted chin. But I'm telling, and you're listening. Dakota testified about payments for violence and targeting of native grounds. Presented surveyor correspondence explaining fraudulent mineral rights plan. This isn't new. This is pattern. But this time there's proof. Judge Harrington listened, then issued warrants. But complication arose. Judge Michael's local judge on Crow's payroll tried intervening. Arrived in Stone Bridge with legal documents claiming jurisdiction, demanding evidence be surrendered to him. Smooth, confident, accustomed to winning. Judge Harrington looked at him with cold contempt. I have documentation of monthly payments from Fitzgerald Crow to Judge M, totaling $900 over 18 months. Care to explain, Judge Michaels? Michaels' face drained. That's misunderstanding, clerical error. Is your name Judge M? Well, yes, but did you receive payments from Mr. Crow? Michael's mouth worked. No words came. You're under arrest. Bribery, obstruction of justice conspiracy. Then Madeleine's preparation paid off. When Crow's men had searched her trunk days earlier, which they had exactly as she predicted, they found the flawed copies in the false bottom and reported to Crow they had the evidence. Crow had believed he was safe, that the real ledger was destroyed in the flood. He was wrong. The real copies sewn into Madeleine's coat lining remained intact. And more, Madeleine had done one additional thing her husband had taught her. Before leaving Amos's ranch, she had written detailed summary of all evidence and given it to Amos's eldest son Thomas, with instructions, if they did not return within 4 days, ride to Stone Bridge and deliver it directly to the circuit judge. Thomas had delivered it the day before they arrived as safeguard, so that even if they died, the evidence would survive. When Judge Harrington revealed this, Madeleine felt her husband's presence like a hand on her shoulder. Smart thinking, Em. I taught you well. Sheriff Harlan tried fleeing, made it 10 miles before local ranchers blocked road, held him at gunpoint until deputy arrived. Taken into custody, face-pale, confidence broken, Crow was arrested at his ranch, did not go quietly, shouted about property rights, legal claims contracts. You can't do this. I built this territory. Judge Harrington looked at him with cold contempt. You built nothing but crimes, Mr. Crow. Now you answer for them. Ledger made denial impossible. Mine placed under scrutiny. Land claims frozen pending investigation. Hired guns arrested on warrants. Pete was found drowned in floodwater body recovered 3 days later, bloated and broken. Death anchored the price. Dr. Carolina Weiss did not survive. Gash became infected. Despite efforts, fever took her 4 days after flood. Died in quiet room, Madeleine holding her hand, Lakota standing silent vigil. You kept your promise, Dr. Weiss whispered, barely audible. I did. The children, safe now? Yes. Water will be clean. Dr. Weiss smiled faintly. Good. Then it was worth it. But her work did not die. Young doctor named Samuel Chen, trained in San Francisco, arrived 2 weeks later. Heard about Dr. Weiss's fight through medical circles, wanted to continue her legacy. Reopened clinics, studied her logs, began treating sick children. Within a month, children recovered. Fevers broke, color returned. Families who had buried hope began breathing again. Lakota returned Ayita to Lakota camp-faced wary elders. Offered outcomes, not promises. Winter caches, rebuilding Crow's threat, eliminated fraudulent survey, exposed. How long will this last? An elder asked. I don't know, Lakota said honestly. But it's better than yesterday. We'll fight to make tomorrow better still. Elder watched him, then placed hand on shoulder. You honored your vow. Lakota touched eagle feather in hair. Vow, never explained to outsiders. I tried. You did more than try. You succeeded. Final surprise came from unexpected source. Stonebridge clerk revealed Judge Harrington had made duplicate copies immediately upon receiving evidence, sent them to Denver territorial authorities by express rider that same night. Standard procedure when judge suspected corruption, safeguard preventing evidence from vanishing. Judge doesn't take chances, clerk explained. When he saw murder confession and bribe records, knew this was bigger than one death. Made copies, everything, sent them out immediately. Madeleine pressed hand to mouth, overwhelmed. So, even if something happened to us, evidence would have survived. Yes, ma'am. Crow could not make it vanish. His influence was broken, network exposed. Mine remained under investigation. Territorial authorities opened inquiries into every contract and claim bearing his name. Justice was not perfect, but it was real. 6 weeks later, on cold spring morning, Mud Creek gathered at small cemetery. Memorial stone erected for Dr. Weiss, paid by contributions from families she treated. Read Dr. Carolina Weiss. She healed the sick and fought for the voiceless. Madeleine stood graveside reading passage from Dr. Weiss's medical journal, words about responsibility of those who can help to those who cannot. Lakota stood beside her arm, healing out of sling. Amos and children were there. Ayita and Lakota camp members came standing respectfully at gathering's edge. When ceremony ended, people lingered, speaking quietly, sharing memories. First time many had gathered without fear. That evening, Madeleine found Dakota by river, watching water run clear and cold. Stood beside him in silence. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Return to my people? Help rebuild? And after—" He looked at her, faint smile touching lips. "Haven't thought that far." "Neither have I." She hesitated, then spoke words held inside for weeks. "But I know I don't want to do it alone." His expression softened. "You're not alone." "I know, but I mean—" Took breath. "Would you consider staying? At least a while. Amos needs help with ranch. Children need teaching. And I could use partner. Someone who doesn't run when things get hard." Dakota watched her, then held out his hand, not romantic gesture, but practical. Partnership. Promise. She took it. 3 months later, warm afternoon in early summer, Madeleine and Dakota stood together before a small gathering at Amos's ranch. Ceremony was simple, no elaborate decorations, no formal church. Traveling minister spoke briefly about commitment and partnership. Madeleine wore simple dress she had sewn. Dakota wore clean buckskins and that single eagle feather. When minister asked if they would pledge themselves to each other, both answered simply, yes. Amos's children scattered wildflowers at their feet. Ayita presented blanket woven by camp women, gift of acceptance and alliance. Dr. Chen brought wine saved for special occasions. Not grand affair, but honest, and theirs. The last image returned to Story's promise. On sun-drenched prairie, Dakota and Madeleine rode side by side, guiding healthy cattle through tall grass grown after spring rains. Sky was wide and blue. Air smelled of earth and growing things. World stretched before them, no longer place of fear, but place of possibility. Dakota wore no war bonnet, only practical buckskins and that single eagle feather. Vow fulfilled, but feather kept as reminder of what he had fought for. Madeleine glanced at him. He met her eyes. Smile touched her lips, not because danger was gone, but because they had learned to face it together. "Think we'll see trouble again?" she asked. "Probably. And when we do, we deal with it." She smiled slightly. Together, Dakota looked at her, something warm and steady in his eyes. Together. They rode on sun-warm on backs herd, moving peacefully under guidance. Behind them, Mud Creek was rebuilding. Amos's ranch thriving. Dr. Chen's clinic serving sick without prejudice. Children who had been poisoned, growing strong laughter, returning to streets. River ran clear. In small schoolhouse, Madeleine's students, including Amos's children and several Lakota children, sat at lessons learning to read and write and calculate. Barriers dividing communities began softening, not because worlds suddenly became fair, but because people chose to see each other as human. Justice had been slow. Justice had been painful. Justice had cost lives. But justice had come. And in the end, that was everything.